If you saw a young boy dying in a gutter, would you walk past and ignore him? Or would you at least take him to the hospital or get him a doctor? You're probably not the world's most virtuous or altruistic person, but you're probably not the most antisocial either. So what would you do? Walk past him and ignore him, or do something to help? Most people would help. That's not because we're God's perfect holy children. That's because we're humans, and humans are social animals. We're animals who survive by sticking together. So you'd probably help the boy. What you wouldn't do is stand there and theorise about it, demand to know why he's there, or who's to blame, or which office of the local authority to complain to. But what if there was a boy dying in a gutter and it wasn't in front of you and you couldn't see him? When it happens somewhere out of sight, it becomes a different thing, something it is possible to ignore. It's not your responsibility. Somehow the reality is obscured behind layers of rationalizations. It's not a boy dying in a gutter anymore, it's become something else, something more remote and intangible, something without obvious solutions. It's become a question of politics. And politics, as we all know, is a tricky subject that should be left to politicians. Reality is relative, you see. Most of reality is not happening in front of your eyes. It's not real. Most of reality is, in fact, politics. You probably know that there are young boys and girls dying out there in alleys and gutters in the shanty towns of the world's poor quarters. But it's one of those remote realities. And what's the reason for it? We could talk about economics or geopolitics, but the truth is they're dying because they're out of sight and they don't really matter and nobody really gives a damn. When the parents have got no money, the kids don't count. In our reality, we value children so much that we've made ourselves paranoid about real and imaginary threats to them. But in global realities, they're not valued. 1 billion people, that's 1 in 6 of the world's population, can't even get clean water. So, their kids get diarrhea. And 5 million of those kids die every year. Since big numbers don't really mean much to anyone, imagine a jumbo jet, fully loaded with kids up to the age of 5, crashing into a mountain. That would make the headlines in your local town, wouldn't it? Now imagine a jumbo jet doing that every 35 minutes, night and day, forever. And just so it's clear, African children are not worth less than white children, and African parents don't grieve less than European parents. They grieve all right, and they don't get used to it. 300 kids every 35 minutes. A massacre of the innocents, wouldn't you call it? Why do famines exist? Too many kids, say some people. After all, we Westerners only have small families. But we only have small families nowadays. In Victorian times, we used to have huge families because a lot of the kids were likely to die. And we needed kids to look after us when we got old because nobody else was going to. So it seems a bit unfair to blame the Africans for doing now what we used to do before we got good health care and pensions. If there's no food at all, even one person is too many people. So is famine a population problem? Over 20 years ago, the World Health Organization calculated that the technology existed to feed a world population 12 times its size. Well, we didn't need to feed a world population 12 times its size. We only needed to feed a population 1/12 of that, the one we actually had. So did we? No, we didn't. 20 years ago, we had the terrible Ethiopia famine instead. We are lucky in the West, there's no denying it. We don't have a water face, we're not slaves, we're not starving. Our kids get an education, public health, a choice of food, a measure of security and comfort. But are we having a good time? Are any of us? Many of us don't have jobs or careers or prospects. Those of us who do work are forced into the regimentation of the workplace, of bosses, of timesheets and production quotas, reports, key performance indicators, the 9 to 5, the bills, the mortgage, the stress. Our kids are now being made to work harder and from a younger age to become skilled and employable. Kids of 5 are now being given homework. We live in the world of capitalism, and as everybody knows, capitalism is not perfect. It has problems. Everybody knows that what we have to try to do is fix the problems with reforms. That's why we vote for politicians. They're supposed to be fixing it for us. Capitalism is like a car that's permanently on blocks, with some politician underneath it, and another one in the bonnet, shaking his head, saying, oh dear, that looks bad, that does. You keep paying the bills, but the car never gets fixed. You begin to think the politicians don't really know what they're doing. But what can you do? Capitalism may not be perfect, but it's the only thing we have, and after all, it does work. Sort of. Sort of. We have the most advanced technological society that's ever existed. But when it comes to doing something useful, like feeding the people in it, or limiting pollution, or limiting global warming, we can only manage sort of. Here's a question. Does anybody at all ever watch party political broadcasts anymore? The problem with party political broadcasts is that they're boring and you don't believe a word of what they're saying. They're like soap powder adverts, each citing dubious evidence to show they're better than the others. This isn't a party political broadcast, for 2 reasons. First, nobody's asking for your support, your votes, your obedience, or your money. Second, what you are being asked to do is much harder than that. The idea is for you to question the basis of modern society, yourself. Think about it, and then go away and think what to do about it. I'm not going to tell you what to do or how to think. What I want to do is simply explain a point of view to you. It's a point of view that is not explained very often, anywhere you go, in anything you see on TV. But it exists, and it's quite widespread. What you do about it is up to you. You can reject it, but it's important to understand what you're rejecting. Politicians talk about this problem or that issue within capitalism. The real reason why politicians all sound the same, and why people find it so hard to be interested in politics, is that they all have this same frame of reference. If you question capitalism itself, you automatically put yourself outside that frame of reference. And that's when the